forward.
Welcome, one and all. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on the Oracle Broadcasting Radio Network. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. The network's website is oraclebroadcasting.com. Today is Sunday, September 23rd, 2012. Of course, this show is live every Sunday from 5 to 7 p.m. East Coast time. That's 4 to 6 p.m. Central time. We have a good show planned for you here today. It's going to be yet another all-call-in show on the topic of the non-support of dominators. The non-support of dominators, a topic that we have been covering over the last several weeks here on this show, and we're going to be taking your calls on this topic today. I'll give the call-in number right now at the top of the show. The call-in number is 866-841-1065. Once again, the call-in number for the show, toll-free, 866-841-1065. The topic is the non-support of dominators. Anything that we have covered in this section of solutions on the show is fair game to talk about here today on the show. There is one prerequisite for calling in only if you want to call in to defend the practice of Carnism, which we talked about as one of the forms of domination, which I talked about as the ultimate expression of domination. In other words, meat eating. And if you want to call in to defend that practice, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But if you want to call in to defend it, the prerequisite for doing so is that you will have had to have watched the movie Earthlings, the documentary film Earthlings. If you haven't watched that film, I'm in all honesty, not really interested in hearing what you have to say in defense of Carnism. If you have watched that film, I'll take your call and hear your defense of this immoral practice. But if you haven't watched it, I feel like you don't really understand what you're even defending. You have not seen firsthand what you are actually advocating. And therefore, I feel like someone in that state of consciousness, in that state of ignorance, really doesn't have much worth saying. So if you've seen Earthlings and you want to defend Carnism still, feel free to call in and defend it with that being the prerequisite that you've seen that documentary film from beginning to end. Okay, in one sitting. I'm talking about sitting down and actually watching that documentary and really taking it in, not watching 2 minutes of it and then deciding it's too difficult to get through and putting it down, okay, this event. And the march was done very effectively. It was at a good pace. It wasn't rushed. And people brought out flyers. We outreached to the public. I've never seen more people take this information from us than at this rally. And I'll tell you another reason I think it was is, and we commented on this at the rally, there were the Ron Paulers did not really come out to this rally. It was all focused on the topic of ending the Fed. It wasn't about supporting a political candidate. You didn't see a lot of Ron Paul signs in the crowd. You saw people who really had knowledge about what the Fed is, how it's a total financial fraud, how it's a Ponzi scheme, and they were there to stick to that topic. It was a focused effort, and that's what made it effective. And when we reached out to people on the street, they didn't see it as, well, this is some kind of a political campaign, and who cares about that candidate? They saw it as, what are they trying to tell us, about this institution? And I'd say about 90% of people who I reached my hand out to with a flyer with information about this fraudulent institution took that flyer out of my hand, and I've never, ever seen that high of a percentage of people who were at least open-minded enough to want to receive the information. It was usually about a 50-50 split in the past, maybe even a little bit less than that. About 90% of people took information about the Federal Reserve systems, at least out of my hand, who I tried to hand it to yesterday on the street here in Philadelphia. And that was an
People are calling in and arguing with you about this, are they?
Well, I would suggest that we might not get very many people to argue the point because of the prerequisite that I set. And what I have noticed is that those who defend the practice won't sit down and watch Earthlings, or they haven't. And if they did, their position will magically, almost magically, change because they are really seeing firsthand what this practice.
Keep going.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the call. And what I would say about regarding, raising fish is I wouldn't look at that as any different than raising any other kind of animal for consumption. However, one of the points I think that could be taken from this is that we do need to be around our own food. I think part of the problem that we're facing in society as far as dependency goes is that food is grown well outside of where we live, and then it's trucked in from outside, and that uses way more energy, way more resources, makes it more expensive. We need to be growing food around where we live and, walking past our food on a daily basis. That's really what a smart society would be doing. And doing it in the city, it makes it difficult. There are challenges associated, but there's a lot of different techniques for people who want to do this, and they're researchable and they work. And if more people started doing them, then it would kind of become an organic process that would become easier and easier to do. The problem is so few people are engaged in that practice. I can tell you, we do have a little garden in our backyard, but to step it up to the point where we can get the volume of food that we need, it's difficult to do. And it's expensive to do as well. So we need to engage in practices that are kind of distributed, and a lot of people are engaging them and helping out the effort. There's a lot of information about this online. You could even just look up on YouTube, growing food around where you live. There's projects and communities that are getting behind efforts such as that, and I think that's definitely really important, and it takes us away from dependency and domination, because food is one of the biggest dependencies that there is, and that's what the dominators ultimately want to control.
Self-disclosure and amending the past, and that's it.
Part of what I brought up in the speech that I gave at the end of the Fed rally yesterday was that admitting that we are wrong is not a weakness, it's a strength. Being willing to look at oneself, say, no, my former actions were wrong, and I'm willing to make an apology. And the apology is actually changing the actions. It's not just about saying that you're sorry, it's about then actually reversing the course of your actions and doing something differently. So that's definitely a strength, and people need to see the admission of wrongdoing, the admission of a formerly poisoned worldview, and the actions that are based on that worldview. Being willing to say, no, that was wrong, and I can reverse my position, I can change my mind on that, then do something different. That is absolutely 100% a strength and not a weakness, and should not be looked at as such by people. The ego wants us in that condition where we can never admit that we are wrong. That is a weakness. That is what keeps us weak. That is what keeps us, held back from evolution.
That aren't able to call in right now, but your show is it is so awesome, and I'm so appreciative of what you're doing.
Well, I appreciate you, sir. So thanks so much for the call, and you brought up a lot of good points there, because the truth is always simple. The truth is simple. It isn't about bogging people down with an overabundance of details. It's about getting down to the primary fundamental axioms of our belief systems and challenging them from that level. It's from a deep philosophical level that we have to look at what our deepest held beliefs are, challenge them, and find out if they hold true. And if they do not, they have to be let go. The attachment must be released from them. And that's what people have a difficult time doing, because they've been so used to staying in that belief system that they don't know what else there is. They're in fear of abandoning that, because then their thinking goes to, well, what else is there? What, if I don't accept this, what is real? And that's a very insecure feeling for most people. We have to always take it back to the philosophical fundamental axioms. When we get down to the very base foundations of a belief system and analyze it from there, take a deep look at it from there, that's where we're going to get to the heart of truth. And ultimately, as this past caller said, that's all about looking into oneself. That's about looking into the mirror, is what that's about. So, great points. Great.
It's just entertainment, but it's so much more than that. And it's actually part of a larger
Yes, there is a ritualistic setting to a lot of these behaviors, and you just need to look into how much pharmaceuticals are injected into these animals, because of the living conditions that they live in, hormones as well, to make them bigger. It's unbelievable what we're taking in through a lot of this food, and people will say, oh well, then you just go to animals that aren't treated with hormones like that, or animals that aren't treated, with chemicals like that. Again, as we talked about last week, it's still a consumption of fear. Ultimately, you're consuming something that was taken through violence. So you're taking in the energy of violence through the field of energy, through the field of consciousness that we all live in. The problem is that many people refuse to acknowledge that interconnection. They don't want to acknowledge that we are not separate from our surroundings and from other beings around us. We are not 100% individuated. We are individuated expressions of consciousness, but that doesn't mean we're cut off from everything around us, and nothing that takes place around us doesn't affect us at a deep fundamental level. That worldview, that paradigm of separation is also what needs to be released. We need to release attachment that we are separate from everything else and from the surrounding field of energy and life that is all around us. We are part of that. There is no separation between us and that. And that's what this, worldview healing is all about, is about understanding that oneness, that lack of separation. Too many people from a left brain perspective are caught in that paradigm of separateness. And to the extent that we're in that paradigm...
Movies that are coming out too, like this Hunger Games, the Hostel movies, all these Saw movies that came out.
Well, I think the Hunger Games in particular is a pretty allegorical about what we could be facing if we keep going down this path. Yeah. So I look at that film as like a warning. I think people should check out that film and the books, because I checked them out. I read into them. And while, I thought, the ending of the third book was, to me, seemed anticlimactic. I was expecting something a little bit bigger, but aside from the literary aspects of it, I think it's still a great allegory regarding the path that we're heading down as a species into total serfdom, complete enslavement and serfdom if we don't wake up and realize what's being done.
I think it's worse than serfdom. Serfdom doesn't even begin to.
Yeah, it's a sacrifice ritual is what it is. They're sacrificing children in the Hunger Games. That's what they're doing. So... absolutely.
It's crazy. It's just the people that what the show is called. It's on YouTube. It's called Epic Mealtime, and it's funny because it's abbreviated as EMT. And I believe EMTs are like paramedics.
Yes.
And it's really weird. It's like my sister came back one day with some homework talking about spying for the Obama administration. It was called FIA. But the FIA is like a family independence agency. It was really weird, but they use these abbreviations I've been noticing more and more to associate things.
Sure.
But
well,
if you
go ahead.
Oh yeah, if you could check it out, because I've been trying to tell people about it and trying to warn people, but it's just I can't get any kind of a validation that I go to my Christian grandmother and I try to tell her that they say right on their thing that they're trying to create an antichrist, and she's just like, I guess it's just too much of a paradigm shift. Right. You just can't take it. So
the more carnage, the more bloodletting, the more fear that's released, the closer they are. They feel that their belief system is they're going to absorb and direct that energy. This is part of the belief system in the dark occult, is that the energy of suffering can be channeled and then directed by them for their aims. Whether you believe that or not, that's their belief and why they continue to do the practices that they do. So I haven't seen these particular videos personally, but I'm going to definitely check it out on your recommendation, and maybe I'll comment on it on a future show. So thank you for the call, and I definitely agree that there's an entire ritualistic aspect and overtone, especially when you see these big, huge gatherings of these meat-eating festivals and wing bowls and things like that are all about putting people into the mentality of just animalistic consciousness and writhing in that, over-gorging yourself on as much meat as you could possibly take into your body, before you burst. There's definitely a ritualistic overtone, and I think part of it is to keep people in base consciousness and base awareness, because that's what, a degree